So in chapter 3, verse 30, we are looking at a blueprint of a perfect action. All of the elements that go into creating an action are angled towards that outcome. They are each performing their role. So we have the physical body, the thing which does the action itself. I'm speaking. It's my vocal cord. It's my breath. It's my body. We have the mind, which is the emotions and the feelings, the desires backing it. We have the gross intellect, whose function is to discriminate between the infinite pairs of opposites that comprise the terrestrial world. The terrestrial world refers to that which has quality and property, which has form, which has function, and which is subject to change. So the terrestrial world doesn't simply mean the gross material world. Your emotions, they are subject to change. They have a form of their own. The subtle intellect has the same fundamental function of discrimination, but now it discriminates between the entire terrestrial world and that which is not the terrestrial. It posits the existence of an absolute, of the self with a capital S. So that self with a capital S was what we discussed, or what was described at length in chapter 2. So each of these four elements is functioning perfectly in an ideal action. So what does it say? Renouncing all actions in me, with thoughts resting on the self, free from hope and attachment, fight without mental fever. This is Krishna's advice to Arjuna. So we're going to go through each of these elements in turn. The first is renouncing all actions in me. Okay. So the renouncing of all action is referring to the activity or the discipline of the mind. So in a perfect action, the role of the mind is to surrender. So when we use this word surrender, what does it mean? Often when we try to understand what we mean by a particular concept, it's instructive to think about its opposite. So the opposite of surrender is resistance. So what we are surrendering when we talk about the ideal action is the mind's personal demands. Think of it from the perspective or the context in which the Gita is taking place. It's a war, it's a battle. What does surrender mean then? You give up the assertion of your territory. You give up the assertion of your battlefront. There's something that you were holding on to, that you were pushing forward, that you yield in the face of something greater. So this is what we can think of as what we are surrendering in the context here. The phrase that we're going to work with for this portion is extrinsic aspirations. Okay, so what do we mean by that? The idea of extrinsic aspirations refers to the objects outside of ourselves that we are seeking to acquire and enjoy. Things such as wealth, status, fame, they are outside of ourselves. So they are personal demands. They are that sense of I want. So we look at a particular external object and it's seen as an end in itself. The mind has that attitude of when I get that, then I'll be happy. So in the previous verse, or in the previous class, we were talking about this verse where he says, as the ignorant act attached to action. So this is what is being renounced. The ignorance is the belief that the external object can bring well-being. Because I have that belief, there is this personal demand, expectation, and attachment for that personal extrinsic object. So this becomes something that we need to assess for ourselves. What am I doing and why am I doing it? Say at the end of the month, we're all very good, perhaps, some of us more so than others, at going through our bank statements. We're looking at where we're spending our money and adjusting accordingly. Where am I spending my attention? What are the aspirations that I'm spending my attention on? Do a reconciliation. How do you reconcile that with what you know to be worthwhile pursuing? So as we learn more about human psychology, as we learn more about these wisdom traditions like the Bhagavad-Gita, we begin to understand that extrinsic aspirations are correlated with a reduction in well-being. So there's a quote here: research has shown that having one's goals and aspirations focused on money, status, or fame are likely to affect well-being negatively even when successfully attained. This is key. Even when you are successful in achieving extrinsic aspirations, external objects, the effect is detrimental to our well-being. Not to speak of when we strive for those things and don't get them. Double burden. Even when we do get them, our well-being is negatively affected. So the mind has this belief: when I get the wealth, fame, status, then I'll be happy. So when he says renounce, when he says surrender, what is it that we are surrendering? It's the wrong understanding. It's the ego-centered self-interest, the personal demand. That is what we are surrendering. That's what we're giving up. The extrinsic motivation. So when he says renouncing all actions in me, he's not referring to the object itself. You have to pay your bills. If you want to spread the knowledge of your discipline to others for their well-being, you have to have a certain degree of status. You have to have a certain degree of renown. You continue to pursue those objects, but they are no longer extrinsic aspirations. Reconnect back to your higher purpose. And that personal demand of, I want to be famous so that I can be famous, that part is surrendered. Not the activity itself. No activity per se is selfish or unselfish, extrinsic or intrinsic. It's the underlying thought processes. So if you say renouncing all actions in me, look at the word me. What do you notice about it? Capitalized. Means the absolute, the self, the transcendental as opposed to the terrestrial. So renounce all terrestrial motivations. The highest terrestrial motivation to be the best human being you can be, to reach your absolute potential as a man, as a human. That too, renounce it. The desire to be self-realized, you must renounce it. So every action will have that taint of ego somewhere in it. And so it ultimately must be transcended for something that is higher. So it's a matter of surrendering the lower for the increasingly higher ideal. Every ideal to the highest, which is me, capital N. That which is without ego, without quality and property, without identity, without definition. It's pure subject. So the question is, how do we surrender? How do you let go of the demands, the personal demands for wealth, for fame, for status? So this is where we get into this other idea of intrinsic aspirations. So that's where the image on the right is instructed. How do you let go of the lower rung? By reaching for and grasping the higher rung. When you're holding on to the higher rung, you can let go now. That becomes your higher ideal. Now you reach for something higher again. Now you can let go of that. So the way to surrender is to have what we're talking about as intrinsic aspirations. So the same source says that the more one's goals are focused on giving to others or on personal growth, the more likely one is to be flourishing and experiencing meaning in life. So we experience greater well-being when our motivations are intrinsic. Giving to others and personal growth. So when we talk about intrinsic aspirations, the word that we often use is ideal. So when we employ an ideal, it means that the action that we are directing our body towards now is done to serve another person's well-being or another group's well-being. It's done for our own personal growth. It's done for our self-realization. So what we're surrendering is our selfishness to the ideal. And the word selfishness here takes on a very broad definition. It's not just referring to that grasping, give me, give me, give me. The word selfishness here also refers to the identification of yourself as body, mind, intellect. You're giving that up. Renouncing all actions in me means that you reconnect back to your higher ideal, your higher purpose. So he gives a definition of an ideal in the commentary to this verse. An ideal represents a nobler, greater purpose in your activity beyond the selfish interest in your own body, mind, and intellect. So while you are pursuing wealth, while you are pursuing the growth and reach of your business, while you are pursuing becoming well known in your community, status, why? When you reconnect back to your ideal, the mind's tendency for, yeah, I'd love to be rich. Yes, I'd love to be famous. Yes, I want everyone to know how good I am, and so forth. All of those are suspended. They fall away. The mind surrenders that to the higher purpose, the highest of which is to step off the whole game, to wake up out of the dream, to realize yourself, to become one with me. So this becomes the self-inquiry that should pervade our actions. What is my ideal here? When we find ourselves disturbed by our environment, things become a drudgery, things become a burden, things become frustrating. It means we have lost sight of our higher purpose. When we are focusing on a higher ideal, our own personal demands and expectations are no longer in focus to us. And so we are relieved of the burden that desire and expectation put onto our well-being. Reconnect. The fact that you are feeling frustrated, burdened, anxious is an indicator to you that you have forgotten your ideal, or perhaps that you don't have one at all. renouncing all actions in me. This also talks about the gross intellect. So what the gross intellect is doing is assessing the action we are performing, the emotions that we are feeling, the thoughts we are entertaining, and the intention that we hold in the action. It then discriminates. Is this activity going towards my ideal? If this is the effect I want, what are the causes? Is this a cause? Yes, do it. Is this a cause? No, don't do it. This is the function of the gross intellect. I want to be lazy, but it goes against my ideal. So I clip it. I don't do it. I renounce, I sacrifice, I surrender my personal interest towards the higher ideal. Next aspect is with thoughts resting on the self. This is the function or the job of the subtle intellect. So when we are trying to engage with the subtle intellect, we're looking for something that lies outside the body, mind, and intellect. There are different ways that we can approach it, and each person would find the way that is most conducive for them. But some simple self-reflection questions are presented here. From where do my actions ultimately arise? Singing. If you like singing, this is a good example. Pay close attention to your vocal cords. They're perfectly at rest. Can you find the moment when they go from 0 to 1, starting to vibrate? Where does that come from? Why? It comes from the brain. Okay, can you pinpoint that moment when the brain fires that first neuron to instruct the vocal cords to vibrate, etc.? You can understand where this might be going. Ultimately, where does action arise from? Perceptions, thoughts. They are here in my awareness. How is this possible? There's a noise over there. How is it possible that the vibration of something over there, a guitar string, gives rise to the first person subjective experience of sound in my mind? How does that happen? Why am I conscious at all? And who is this me that I'm even referring to? All of these questions are designed to get us to contemplate on that which lies beyond the contents of experience. What is the ground on which they play? What is the space in which they arise? The subtle intellect's job is to ignite that awareness. So he describes this again in the commentary. He says, your intellect maintains an awareness of the self as the primary source of all actions. How is it done? The example that we often describe in trying to convey this is the Shruti. So in Indian classical singing, you have a singer, of course, who is rendering the known melody. And in the background, you have someone playing a stringed instrument that provides perhaps a single droning note all the way through. If you listen to Indian classical music, it's that first thing that comes into the listener's awareness, that Shruti note. That itself sends a shiver up the spine. You know what's about to begin. The singer attunes to that note, attunes internally with that sound. And then the singer weaves the different notes around that Shruti. And that distance from the Shruti to every note creates the texture, creates the emotional texture of the song. So the singer is always attuned to that Shruti note. So too, before we sing life's song, if you want to stay with that kind of metaphor, we attune to something first. The Shruti is there before the song makes its appearance. What is there before you perform any action? It's me. I'm here. The action hasn't started yet, whichever action it happens to be. I'm here. The perception has not yet come into my awareness, but I'm here. The emotion has not yet sprung. The thought has not yet been injected into my awareness, but I am here. What is that I that is there before, during, and after every perception, emotion, thought has arisen and fallen? That's the job of the subtle intellect. Thoughts resting on the self. So in order to be able to do this, it requires a digested understanding of this concept. So this is where our daily reflection practice is so important. We have a theoretical understanding of what we mean by the self. We have contemplation on it. We have practices to try and understand it and sit with it. And the more we do that, the more we are creating that groove in the brain, as it were. The easier it is to attune to that inner self and then act. Similarly, with practice, with a digested understanding of this concept, we can attune here and focus there at the same time.